The recent tax reform bill, while promoting tax simplification and fairness, has actually sparked significant concerns within Nigeria's education sector. Now, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, that's ASUU, warns that the provisions targeting the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, TETFund, threaten to destabilize tertiary education. Specifically, the proposed reduction of corporate taxes allocated to TETFund from 4% in 2025 and 2% by 2030, which will drastically limit its ability to fund universities. Now, ASUU President Professor Emmanuel Osodeke argues that diverting these funds to the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, that's NELFUND, for student loans, risks undermining TETFund's crucial role in developing higher education infrastructure and resources, and ultimately express fears of reduced intervention capacity under the proposed reforms. Now, joining me this evening, we have two guests. We have himself, Professor Emmanuel Osodeke, ASUU President from Abuja, and we also have Senior Lecturer, Department of Accountancy, Kaduna Polytechnic, Ibrahim Yunusa. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let me begin with Professor Osodeke. Now, just to have a sense of what you actually said to begin with, just give us an idea of what the tax reform bill actually means for the education sector.
Well, thank you very much for giving the opportunity for this. TETFund is an intervention institution that was established based on the struggle of ASUU when government indicated that they didn't have enough money to fund the educational system during the era of President Babangida. And when you check around all the universities today, you find out that 99% of the projects, structural projects in Nigerian university are product of TETFund. More than 90% of our colleagues who have gone for training at for doctoral level, that's PhD, are all funded by TETFund. More than 80% of the research grant today we have Nigerian universities are product of TETFund. And suddenly, when you look at this new tax, so-called tax reform act that they are proposing, you find out that by 2030, it will cease to exist. And two, it will by 2025, which is this year, it will increase to 4% for TETFund, NASENI, and NICTA, which have nothing in common. The nothing in common between TETFund, NIDA, and NASENI. So why you put that together? So, and then by 2028, it will reduce to 2% for the three. And then by 2030, ASUU and TETFund, NASENI, and NIDA will be scrapped. And then money goes to NELFUND. They have no relationship with it. NELFUND is not intervention in education. It's not. NELFUND is what NELFUND is trying to do is to relocate the student fee payment from the parents to the students. That's all. The same amount. So you're not adding a cover to the system. If the parents were paying 100,000 per session in a university, what TETFund is instead of the parents paying? NELFUND will not give loan to the student to pay. They will pay back in future. So you are adding nothing to the system. So why would you scrap an establishment that is working, that's changing the system, and you give it to students to pay their fee that the parents are already paying? So to me, it's very strange. Why would you scrap the only federal establishment that seems to be working?
So you're saying that you believe that, education funding is actually being disproportionately targeted in the tax reforms?
Please come again.
I said you're saying that education funding is being disproportionately targeted in the tax reforms.
Definitely, because TETFund is 3% of the profit of companies that is allocated to distribute around the country to the universities, polytechnic, and college education, the federal and state. Today, most of the state universities exist capital project or TETFund. So why would you not reduce TETFund to loan for students to pay the fee that they're already paying? Well, what we're trying to do is to change who is paying. Is it the parents or guarantor, or is it the student? You are not changing to the student, so that when a student is graduating, you carry the loan on your head. Why would you do that for a country? I really, there's no reason whatsoever they have it. I mean, while he did this, they didn't even bother to call the union, ASUU, NASU, ASUU, COASU, and ASUU.
All right, we'll still talk more about, if you were able to, have a sit down with the government. But let's hear from Mr. Yunusa now. Mr. Yunusa, now we know that in 2024, TETFund achieved a record-breaking 1.5 trillion naira in education tax collection. And we'd like to know if you actually agree with ASUU. How do you discern the proposed reduction affecting TETFund's capacity to support tertiary institutions?
Sorry, if you may come again, I cannot get the question clearly.
The question I asked is, do you agree with ASUU on this?
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Yunusa, your network is really bad. You might want to check that. So let's come back to you, Mr. Osodeke. Now, the bill actually states that, and you did say that in 2030, that TETFund's allocation is expected to reduce from 2% to 4%. Now, can you tell us what challenges are universities likely to face if TETFund's funding diminishes as projected in the tax reform bills?
Actually, what the bill says about 2030, the TETFund will get zero. The 2% will go to NELFUND. So it's not a reduction, it's scrapping. The implication is this. One is the capital project that the universities are getting from TETFund will cease to exist. Laboratories, classrooms, lecture theater, and laboratory equipment, and so forth will cease to exist. Two, staff training. Education, the minimum requirement for you to be a lecturer and get to the top.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on the conversation. We apologize for the break. We've been able to reconnect with Professor Osodeke, ASUU President, and just before the break, we're actually talking about, the challenges that universities or tertiary institutions might likely face, due to the tax reform bills. And Professor Osodeke, you're talking about some of these challenges just before we lost you there. Please go ahead.
Like I said, capital projects in virtually all Nigerian universities. And then you can go around and look at them. They are where the signal to say TETFund, we go. Two, academic staff training. Today, for you to be to rise in the system, you must get a PhD. And 99% of those being trained today are funded by TETFund. Then you have research grants. You have laboratory equipment. You have the trainings. They will all go, just because you want to convert it to a loan. And I think that is not fair. If you want to try to convert it to a loan, you want to fund your NELFUND, then like as in the law, that 1% of it, custom generated revenue will go to NELFUND, and then you fund it. You don't have to come and kill what is existing that is doing well to fund loan. So that's what we are saying.
Okay.
For our universities to survive, please, we want to appeal to the government, to the National Assembly. They should not interfere with the TETFund. They should look for that alternative to fund the NELFUND and leave the TETFund the way it is, because it's doing well.
Oh, okay. Now, we know that there have actually been concerns about, the priorities that this government has actually given to education. So what does this, ultimately say about government's priorities for tertiary education? What does the reduction signal?
Well, to be true, the government has not given any priority. This government has not also given, just like the other government, they've not given priority to education. When you check this year, you're only giving 7% of your budget to education. The minimum any country is giving West Africa education is 15%. So no priority. And then what is on ground, serving as they're trying to save the system, you want to scrap it. Then it will collapse. Just like the primary school and secondary school have collapsed. And what is the idea? And for the idea is very clear. Most of these people you have, whether it's the National Assembly, most of the politicians, they have their private universities. The idea is to kill the public and let the private run. And we will not allow that. And one way to do that is to destroy and ensure the TETFund still ceases to exist. I don't think it's fair for Nigerian people.
Oh, all right, now let's hear from Yunusa. I hear that he has been able to rejoin. Now, in your view, Mr. Yunusa, how will, the reduction impact the operational capacity of Nigerian universities? That's if you agree with the concerns of ASUU.
My network is still very poor, cannot hear you very clearly. But then, I think my position on this issue of TETFund is in line with that of ASUU, that the National Assembly should not actually do anything about TETFund, should allow it the way it is running, because TETFund has remained the only body that is actually funding infrastructural development in our universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. If you go around all the schools in Nigeria today, you will find out that majority of infrastructure are actually developed by TETFund. So the government actually tinkering with TETFund at this material point in time will make infrastructural development and also human capacity development in our tertiary institution to suffer. I think that is my point.
All right, now let's go back to Professor Osodeke. Now, speaking of ASUU's stands, what is your view on the proposed diversion of funds, from, TETFund to, the loan fund? Because some have actually said it's a way to go, considering that NELFUND is actually meant to be a beacon of hope for Nigerian students who are aiming to pursue higher education, but, have no means to do that.
Look, what we are saying, when you convert TETFund to NELFUND, you are not adding a couple to the university. All that you are doing is
taken from it,
removing the payment from parents and guardians to the children. You are not adding a couple; it's still the same fees. Therefore, this is box of money that come to university to develop infrastructure as intervention fund from the companies, from the private sectors, will cease to exist. And I don't think that is correct. Private sector should not fund the so-called net fund. Let the government fund it, since it's their project. They look for that means. Let them come and challenge us. We'll tell them how to fund it. If they don't have, they cannot develop their own, let them come to us. We'll develop for them how to fund it. The way we also develop for TETFund or how to fund TETFund. Like in most countries, when you have a problem, you go to your intellectuals. You go to the university to get solutions. If they have a problem with funding NELFUND, as we told them from the beginning, they should come to us and we'll tell them. We'll educate them on how to do it. Rather than go to kill what is already existing to establish what does not have any input to the system. Like I want to say, NELFUND is not a source of funding for university. It's not a source of funding. It's changing who is paying and putting the burden on the children.
Okay. All right, now let's hear, same question from Mr. Yunusa. For the sake of our viewers, NELFUND is a bank, that's meant to lend loans to students. So, Mr. Yunusa, do you agree also that with ASUU opposing this shift from direct funding of institutions to a loan-based model?
In fact, I don't subscribe to that view or opinion by the government, because the government is trying to shift its responsibility to individual students. In fact, the funding model will be a situation whereby students will take loan even before they start earning any amount. They are already in debt, and this will have a serious effect on the cycle of our students even after graduation. So I don't subscribe to that model whereby students will borrow money in order to fund their education. Education is the primary responsibility of the government. So the government must have to strive very hard in order to make sure that its citizens are actually educated. So shifting the burden from the government to the student is not something that I will ever subscribe to. The funding model now is very, very okay, whereby 3% of the company income tax will go into TETFund post and will be used to develop both infrastructure and human human resources in our various
All right, now, Professor Osodeke, can you hear me?
I'm hearing you.
All right, now, you said, ASUU actually labeled the move, to divert funds from TETFund as illegal. Now, while I would actually love you to elaborate on the legal basis for this position, I'd also want to know, earlier you were speaking, I want to know if, the government has actually consulted with ASUU and other educational stakeholders in drafting these tax reform bills, and if they actually haven't, do you plan on engaging with lawmakers to ensure that they understand the long-term consequences of these bills?
Thank you very much. They never consulted, neither ASUU nor COASU nor ASUU. They didn't consult any union. Two, let me also give you the implication of what they are doing. Once they announced this NELFUND in the 2023, between now and now, many universities polytechnic hack up their fees, and the process that students dropout has increased. We are doing a research on that. We're going to publish to this nation what has happened with the student population in Nigerian university as at 2023 and down. Many have dropped out because how many students want to go and burden themselves with so much loan when they graduate? That is one. Two, when you look at this year budget proposal by the executive arm, they are allocating 127 billion naira for overhead costs for running of the NELFUND. Meanwhile, throughout the past 2 years, they have not allocated up to 50 billion as loan to students. You are not giving 50 billion to loan to students as loan, but you are going to spend 127 billion naira as overhead costs. It's just creating another bureaucracy where people will enjoy themselves. That's what you are saying, not with the interest of this country. If not, why would you put 130 billion naira as an overhead cost to run a NELFUND when what you are giving to students in the whole year as loan is less than 50 billion? So that is the problem we are having. They should allow TETFund to stay. They should make budgetary provision for the NELFUND. Look for other sources of funding, but allow TETFund to stay for the interest of this country, the interest of the parents, the interest of the universities, and the interest of the country to have universities that children of the poor can attend.
Okay. Now, still speaking on this, speaking of the, executive branch, proposing this change as part of a wider fiscal reform, do you think that the proposed alternative measures, there can be a proposed alternative measure to the government, or that the government could achieve some fiscal reform without compromising funding? Is there any way?
There are so many ways. There are so much fund there in many of the, parastatals that you can use to fund education. Let me give you a typical one. When the Emir of Kano, Sanusi, was central bank governor, he put at least one project in all federal universities from the fund allocated for that in the central bank. You can check around, you will see them. In every university, he put a project. But since he left, have you seen any project in any university by other governors? So if there is a source of money you can, so such money is there that can be used. And you have another area where they call it cash cow, that you can get money to run the such parastatal they're talking about. You can have budgetary allocation for it. How much? In a year, you only get 30 billion. So why can't government budget 30 billion as grant to students? Or if you want to call it loan as grant to students who are willing. This same government can also give 90 billion naira for individuals to go for Hajj and pilgrimage. You can grant 90 billion to individuals to go, but you cannot give 90 billion to give to students as low, 30 billion to give the students as a grant. So we are saying, instead of this money you give for things that are not necessary, challenge them, put in that NELFUND, and let TETFund breathe and live on its own.
Okay. Professor, is it possible, that the reduction of this TETFund's capacity could worsen educational inequalities between different regions in Nigeria?
You see, if you scrap the TETFund, many universities will collapse, especially the state universities. They will collapse. Even the federal, they will collapse. Because what the funding infrastructure is, so we are appealing again that don't destroy what we have. Don't kill what is working. That's the only government services that you can say it's working, and you can go around this country, you see it. And they are even improving on a yearly basis. So why do you want to destroy it? Why do you want to make it and give it to just as loan, as to a bank to run? So that's what we are saying. Please allow it. This happened during the military era. And when we were having problems and we raise issues and government challenge us, and we provide a solution, which is what you have today. Well, why are we want to kill that? When you know that the budget allocation the federal give to education is less than 7% every year. Unlike in the 60s and 70s, when the Obama and all of us and co give more than 30% of their budget allocation to education, and you can see the impact at that time. Now you are to 7%, you still want to kill the only thing that is serving as agent to allow the state to run. So we want to appeal again to the National Assembly, they should throw that bill out, because it will destroy Nigerian public university and the fate of Nigerian young men and women who are not children of these big men who can go abroad, who can go everywhere to school.
Okay. Now let's hear from Yunusa. Yunusa, if you can hear me, can you speak to us on, your thoughts on how the proposed funding changes would affect the quality of education and also research in Nigerian universities as a lecturer?
As a lecturer, I believe with the scrapping of TETFund, it will affect a lot of things. It will affect the quality of our research. It will affect the quality of our training. It's going to affect the infrastructure being provided by the government. Because as the ASUU President rightly said, if you go to institutions across the country today, you will see the impact TETFund is being making. If you go to some state universities, in fact, all capital projects are done by TETFund. And also, training of the resource persons is usually done by TETFund, especially in training them abroad to go and study abroad and come back and impact on our students. TETFund has been able to do very well in such respect. And there is the issue of conducting researches. In fact, through the National Research Fund, TETFund has actually done remarkably well. So if you are scrapping TETFund today, that implies that you are trying to reduce the quality of education in Nigeria. I don't think you bring any funding model that is comparable to TETFund. So at least the way TETFund is going now is in the right direction for the country, and TETFund should be allowed to continue. That is my own view.
All right, so now let's come back to you, Professor. Now, ASUU has called this reform a threat to the survival of Nigerian universities and has also promised, to make sure that the bill does not pass. Now, what steps are you prepared to take if the National Assembly proceeds with passing these tax reform bills?
We're already doing that. We're already informing the public, educating the public on what they are trying to do. Many of my zones are giving press releases on the implication of what they are trying to do. That is number one. Two, we're also reaching out to the Senate President, we're into the Speaker of House of Rep, we're reaching to the President on the danger of what they are trying to do. Three, we're also mobilizing our colleagues in the other sectors to ensure that let's use the normal political way to stop what they are trying to do, damage they are trying to do in universities. But if at the end all of them fail and they are insisting on going ahead, then our union will sit down and take a proper decision on what to do. Because we don't see our university existing without the TETFund. So if you want to kill it, you are better close down the universities.
Okay. Let's hear same question from you, Yunusa. What advice do you have for ASUU if the bill goes through, if it passes? What can they do?
Yes, from our point of view, the government is not taking the nation to the right direction, because this is a model that is working, and you are proposing a new model which we think will not actually get the result that is needed at this material point. So I will strongly appeal and advise that even if there will be any reform, it should not be a reform that will scrap institutions like TETFund, because TETFund is key to educational development in Nigeria because of the track record we have seen in various institutions across the country. So the government, we are still appealing with the government to please not they should not scrap TETFund, because TETFund is very, very important.
Mr. Yunusa, but you know, some quarters have actually said that, you know, education, healthcare, and food are actually exempted from VAT under the reforms. So shouldn't this be seen as a positive step, or, you know, does it also fail to compensate for the loss of direct funding?
Is that to me?
I don't see it that way, because
please go ahead.
Yes, as I said, as I rightly say, I did not see it that way, because this is an institution that has been actually utilizing its fund over the years judiciously. So any other type of funding that will be proposed or will be used by the company, I don't think it will actually be able to replace what TETFund has been doing in our tertiary institution.
Okay, so let's hear from Professor Osodeke on this.
Yes.
Okay, let's hear from Professor Osodeke on this too.
Well, for us, what is the relationship between TETFund and tax review? There's no relationship. They just want to put that in there for what? That's our own view. Why this establishment, institution established and is running and doing well? Why would you want to damage it because we are doing tax reform? The company is complaining, are they not paying? I have not had any company coming on air to say we don't want to pay, we are complaining, we are agitating. And you want to reduce it and to kill it. I don't think we see, and you should consult with those who elected you. With Nigerians support destroying TETFund. I think that's how we to go. We should not all come from nowhere just to push something on the people, something that's going to destroy the future of Nigerian children, Nigerian young men and women. If you look at a country like America, because of the burden of this so-called loan, the president of America, the outgoing president, decided to pay the backlog of the poor who could not pay. And that's a country where the unemployment rate is less than 5%. But when unemployment is more than 30%, how would the children get jobs? How would they get jobs? How would they pay? Our own idea is, please, allow TETFund to run. Look for other means to fund your loan. Nobody agitated for the loan. You push it on the people. Look for other ways to fund your loan. Let the TETFund that is working, let it continue to work.
Okay, so let's hear your final thoughts, Mr. Yunusa, as well.
Okay, my final thought is that let TETFund continue to be in existence, because we have seen the track record of TETFund, and any other model the federal government is proposing today will actually not be self-sustainable like TETFund, because TETFund has been around for more than 2 decades, and we can attest to the positives of TETFund. And any other model the government is coming up with is something that is alien to us, and we don't believe in it. So we are still appealing to the federal government not to make TETFund as a centerpiece of the discussion of the tax reform bill. They should allow TETFund to be the way it is and find a way of funding the student loan proposal. Let them fund it through other means and allow TETFund to be the way it is currently. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the conversation. Professor Emmanuel Osodeke, ASUU President, and also Ibrahim Yunusa, Senior Lecturer, Department of Accountancy, Kaduna State Polytechnic.